Okay, we'll get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Lunch and Learn webinar. The CCP Committed to Competence, presented by the OASW Southwestern Branch, and in connection with the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers. My name is Jane Gagnon, and I am the current president of the OASW Southwestern Branch, and I'm excited for today's series that we're going to present. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. So first we have Christina Van Sickle, who is the Director of Professional Practice at the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers. In this role, Christina aids in developing resources to support members in their competent and ethical practice, reaches out to stakeholders to promote how college membership contributes to a culture of excellence in the workplace, and supports the college's mandate to protect the public. Christina has worked in the fields of geriatrics, mental health, addiction services, and has wide-ranging leadership experience. Christina has developed and taught several courses, had a small private practice, and has served on a provincial board of directors. Sue Kowalski, sorry,
Okay.
is the professional practice associate at the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers. She promotes the values of ethical and accountable practice by providing members support regarding the interpretation and articulation of the college's standards of practice and code of ethics. Sue contributes to developing college resources and presents to members, prospective members, employers, and the public. She has worked in children and adult mental health services, as well as child protection and developmental services. She has also developed social and organizational policy and worked for several years at the post-secondary level, teaching and developing curriculum. So now I hand it over to Christina for our presentation.
Thank you, Jane. And Jane, I just want to double check. We're scheduled to 1:30 today, right?
Yes, we are.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much for that warm introduction. Pleasure. Thank you, I appreciate that. So welcome everybody. Sue and I are both very excited to be speaking with you today. And we're really excited that Jane and Israel reached out to us in order to ask us to do this presentation about the Continuing Competence Program. We have been asked to do these presentations in the past, and we're excited to have the opportunity to do it again. This is Sue's first CCP presentation, and so I'm going to be taking the lead, but Sue's going to be chiming in throughout, so I look forward to that. And we're also going to be recording the webinar today. So hopefully to be able to have it up on the webinars, or pardon me, the website as soon as possible. You will also hear me talking to some other fantastic college staff member that we have on the line today. I've got Taylor and Rebecca, who are being our wonderful support staff and who are going to be monitoring the chat and the questions. And I'll be periodically checking in with them to find out what questions we have or what's happening in the chat. There's also a interactive part. Typically when we do this in person, we do breakout groups and we have discussion. And so we're going to see how well we can, try to emulate some of that through the chat groups today. So hopefully we'll have some ability to interact that way. And I just also want to put the caveat out that because this is a recording and we're hoping for it to go up on the website, that if you are watching this and it is no longer 2020, it is 2021 or sometime in the future, the required readings that I'm going to talk about for the CCP are going to be different. They change each year. So please just do take that into note, and that you will, if you aren't sure what the required readings are for the year in which you are watching this, then please contact the professional practice department and we will be happy to provide you with some assistance in that issue. Okay, so we're going to jump right in then. Oh, there's one other. I knew that there was another housekeeping item I had. If that you do want to put a question into the question box, please make sure that you're clicking that it's going to go to everyone. And if you are putting something into the chat box, please make sure there's a little drop down arrow at the bottom where you're going to tick who's it going to. Please make sure it goes to the organizers, because Taylor and Rebecca are the organizers for today's presentation. So please do make sure to do those two things so that we're all able to see your chats and your questions. Okay. So we start all presentations at the college with these 4 words because it really grounds the work that we do and also what clients can expect when they're meeting with members of the college. So they know that they're receiving services from somebody who's professional. They know that they're receiving services from somebody who subscribes to a code of ethics and standards of practice, that you're qualified because you've done the rigorous training that was required in order to become a member of the college, and that you do exactly what we're doing today, talking about the continuing competence program in order to maintain that qualification and that competence throughout your career. And of course, you're accountable. You're accountable, of course, to your clients for the work that you do. You're accountable to your employer, to yourself, and of course to the college as well. So these are our 4 keywords that we like to ground our presentations in. So what we're going to be talking about today, we've already, of course, done some introductions, and thank you again, Jane. They were really lovely. We appreciate that. We're just going to do a little overview about the Continuing Competence Program. We're going to look at the documents and the steps that are required. We're going to have a couple scenarios. One is about a lived experience and how you might be able to apply that to the CCP. We're going to try for some group exercise and discussion, and we'll obviously have some time for questions at the end as well. So we do look forward to that. So, why does the college have a CCP? It's a question that we do like to ask, just to really, again, remind members about why we're here today, why we do this program. I mean, Sue and I both have to do it as well, and it's one of those things that at the end of the year, sometimes you're trying to get it all finished and get it done before you renew your membership, and so you can tick those boxes. Ideally, we're supposed to start it at the beginning of the year, and it sets the stage for what our plan is for our professional development throughout the year, so that we can map out what our professional development goals are throughout the year. So if you're like me and you're finishing it at the end of the year, like I am this year, perhaps you'll take that as a tip that, maybe we want to start it a little bit earlier in the year next year so you can map out what your plans are for professional development. But why we have the CCP is to promote quality assurance with the practice of social work and social service work. And we really want to encourage members to enhance their practice in an ongoing way. Sue and I regularly give presentations to students, and I'm sure there may be some students on the webinar today. Some of you may be teachers and professors. And when we're doing our academic studies, I mean, we're so lucky to be able to access the most evidence-based, up-to-date, research-informed evidence and practice knowledge that exists currently. But we all know that as soon as we graduate and we move away from our academic studies, that the information that we have, well, it's like anything else, it becomes dated. And so we have to continually update our competence and continually want to develop ourselves so that we're able to provide the most evidence-based, up-to-date practice and services. We can provide the best service to our clients, and so that we're knowledgeable and have those required knowledge, skills, and experience to provide the best service that we can to our clients. And of course, this is the way in which the college fills its mandate of public protection. The public is here to protect the public. And one of the ways that we do that is to ensure that our members develop their competence in an ongoing way each year. Oh. So I'm going to escape out of this for a second, go into YouTube and share a video with everyone about the Continuing Competence Program.
As social workers and social service workers, we must remain current in our knowledge and continually enhance our practice. That's why, as members of our professions, we are required to complete the CCP. There are many different ways the CCP can help you in your practice. The CCP is a user-friendly tool to help you manage your ongoing learning throughout the year. You can complete a variety of learning activities to ensure you remain confident in your practice and achieve your goals, and all in just 4 easy steps. So, let's get started. Step 1. Review the Code of Ethics and Standards of Practice Handbook. Complete the checklist and reflect on the standards of practice. Step 2. Complete the self-assessment tool by identifying your strengths and learning needs. As a next step, ask a peer, colleague, supervisor, and/or client. Their feedback can help you develop the learning goals that you'll work towards throughout the year. Step 3. The Professional Development Plan. Here, you simply transfer your goals from the self-assessment tool and determine what steps or activities you will complete to meet your learning goals. Be sure to indicate how your goals apply to your practice. Step 4. Complete the Declaration of Participation in the CCP as part of the annual renewal of registration process. And be sure to keep all the documents pertaining to your CCP. But what if you're not practicing? Whether you're a new graduate or off on leave, you are still required to participate in the CCP. You may draw upon lived experiences that support your readiness to practice. After all, it's important for you to continually enhance your confidence for when you return to practice. Participation in the CCP is required on an annual basis and should be completed throughout the year. Get started on your CCP today. Learn more at OCSWSSW.org or email us directly at ccp@OCSWSSW.org.
Okay, coming back to the PowerPoint presentation. Fantastic. Always a little nervous when we're making those transitions there. So that's a video that the college developed a couple of years ago now to assist members in understanding their CCP, and hopefully it provided a nice foundation for our conversation today. And of course, throughout the conversation today, we're going to go a bit more in depth as to what was included in the video. So we know that this is what the CCP or the Continuing Competence Program requires of us. We need to review the standards of practice and the other required documents each year. And for those of you who may not be aware, the college has sent out some information about the other required documents this year. That to give a little background, if you recall, or if you're aware, if you have seen the live stream video that happened at the 2019 AHMED, our annual meeting and education day, we had Dr. Jeffrey Ansluis who presented, and he presented on the work of reconciliation with social work and social service work practice. And in his presentation, he recommended or put out a call to action for members of the college to really familiarize themselves with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada, the calls to action, and also the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And so we took that up in 2020. And so those are two of the things that members are required to review this year as part of their CCP. In addition to that, we have a practice notes, which is called Cultural Humility, a commitment to lifelong learning. And we have sent out some bulletins where we have talked about that and provided links to those documents. And certainly, if you have difficulty finding them, that you can contact us and we can send you the links as well. And if, for your information, it's in a little bit, this isn't a required reading, but it's certainly in the same vein as some of these readings. We have recently released a new practice note, which is called the Ethical and Competent Responses to Anti-Black Racism. So certainly a different but related topic. And although not a required reading, it may be one that you find interesting as well. So those three resources, the Cultural Humility Practice Note, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada Calls to Action, and the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People are are our required readings for the CCP this year, in addition to reviewing the standards of practice, which is the same every year that we require members to review the standards of practice. You're also going to be completing a self-assessment based on obviously your own needs and also considering the standards of practice. You're also going to set goals and carry out learning activities based on your self-assessment. And then you make an annual declaration of participation in the CCP when you renew your membership each year. So in a few weeks, perhaps some of you have already done this, that we're all going to be going into our member portals on the college website, and we're going to be renewing our memberships. And as part of that renewal process, there is a section where we make this annual declaration that we have participated in the CCP. And it's a few tick boxes, and that's how we kind of finalize our CCP process. To clarify, you don't need to send your documents into the college, that you are required to hold on to them for 7 years. The college is able to request to see copies of them or evidence that you've participated in the continuing competence program. And so that's why we ask people to hold on to documents for 7 years, in the same way that we'd have to hang on to our clinical notes or other professional documentation. So this is what we're required to do, and this is what it looks like into these steps. So as I said, review the code of ethics and standards of practice. We're going to complete the self-assessment tool, or which we also call the SAT. Complete the professional development plan, or also called the PDP. And as I said, complete the declaration and retain your CCPC portfolio for 7 years. And so those are what's required. The requirements are mapped over these different steps. And of course, it's important to note that as part of our self-assessment, you may ask a peer, a colleague, a supervisor, or even a client, if that's appropriate, for them to give some feedback on where you're at as well. I'm going to talk about that right now, actually, with respect. Nope, I'm going to talk about it in the next slide, actually. We're also, when we talk about our learning goals, we want to figure out from our learning goals, you're then going to create learning activities and experiences that you will complete to meet those learning goals. And I'll explain that a little bit better shortly. We're going to retain all CCP documents, as I said. And of course, the CCP is a living document. And I think this is really important to highlight and to focus on for a second, because Sue and I will receive phone calls about members who are completing the CCP. And as we all know, I mean, 2020 is a wonderful example that where things were at in January are not where they're at right now. All of our lives have changed quite dramatically. And, you know, of course, we're talking in reference to the global pandemic, but I mean, we can have these moments in our lives that you know, do change. And perhaps what you set out to do at the beginning of the year isn't what ended up happening by the end of the year. The CCP is a living document. It's your document. It's meant to be flexible. It's meant to be meaningful. It's meant to be accessible to you. And so if you set out a goal to do at the beginning of the year, maybe that's changed. And so maybe you need to change that goal. Or also we hear from members who maybe have goals that extend over several years, and that's fine. You can transfer them from one year to the next. Certainly people who are, you know, saying going back to school to update their skills or their education or taking a certificate course, you know, again, it's meant to be flexible and it's meant to be adaptable to your needs. I mentioned the peer feedback part, and you know, not all members do fill in this part because it may not be appropriate for their own CCP. But this might be even an area that if you have a performance evaluation at work, that maybe you want to think about some of the comments that were on that performance evaluation and that you could include them in your CCP. Again, don't have to, it's a suggestion. But we have received some really great feedback that I wanted to share with you about receiving the peer feedback, and it was from a member. And they felt that it was, you know, a very proactive way to receive positive peer feedback that they wouldn't have had the opportunity to do. So the member said that they had approached a colleague, and it was a family physician. And the family physician wrote in their feedback that they've had the pleasure to work closely with the member for a number of years, and on reviewing the document of the scope of practice for a social worker, the doctor was struck by how the member embodies what it means to be a social worker. Not only does their practice span a massive range of potential roles, but they perform them each with excellence. They demonstrate that they've been an agent of positive change. And so this member, out of the blue, decided to contact the college and to provide us with this feedback that the experience of getting peer feedback actually allowed them to educate one of their colleagues, in this case, a family physician, about the role and scope of practice of a social worker. So I thought that was really interesting. Additionally, the same member let us know that they'd also received feedback from a supervisee, and that the feedback from the supervisee indicated that their relationship is built on mutual trust, respect, and integrity, and that for the past several years, the members provided supervision of client cases and guided me in becoming a more competent and effective clinician in my practice with clients. So it was just a really interesting feedback that we received, completely unsolicited feedback from a member about how they really valued the peer feedback section of the self-assessment tool. And again, there is flexibility here because maybe that isn't as appropriate or as available to you into your place of work, but certainly something to consider and something to think about. And I know for myself, when I'm filling out my CCP, is that I reflect on feedback that I've received either throughout the year or through my performance evaluation, and that might be what I include in that column there. I'm just going to pause here for a second to find out if Taylor or Rebecca, did we have any questions or comments coming in already?
No comments.
Okay.
We do have a few people who have audio issues, but
Okay.
that's about it.
If you're having audio issues, something that we discovered ourselves yesterday when we were doing a trial run of the webinar is that you might want to turn off your computer, restart it, and then come back in, because sometimes that can help if you're having audio issues.
Oh, we have a question from Connie. Her question is, how do we document reading articles and materials?
Yeah, great question. And we're going to get to that really soon. So just please hold on to that for a second. And if by going through some of the examples of filling in the CCP, if that still isn't clear, then please let us know and we'll come back to it.
Okay, we have a few more coming in.
Sure.
Sorry, let me just go up. So a question from Catherine, can examples be provided for independent private practitioners?
Okay.
And Carmel asked, I was wondering where we can find the ethical guidelines for responding to anti-Black racism document that you mentioned.
Yeah. That is on our website. So if you go into the college website, on the home page, across the top of the page, you're going to see 6 categories, 6 pop-down menus. In the middle of that is professional practice. You scroll over professional practice, there's a pop-down menu. It says general information. Go in there. On the right-hand side of the screen, you're going to see practice notes. And so if you click on practice notes, all of our practice notes become available, and you'll see them all, and it's on that page. Perhaps another way to do that is just to go to the college homepage, look at the search function and type in practice notes, and you'll be taken to the practice notes page. So yeah, the newest practice note, Ethical and Competent Responses to Anti-Black Racism, is available on the practice notes page of the college website. It's also, if you have the link to the most recent Perspective newsletter, it's included in the most recent Perspective newsletter as well. And as an example, certainly doing any readings of college resources and materials that we put out, that can also be included towards your CCP.
We had a few more come in. Should I continue?
Let's do, I think, 2 more, and then we'll move on and see if we've got those answered, and maybe we'll have a bit more time. Well, we definitely have a bit more time at the end for those questions.
Sure. So the next one is, can my volunteer work hours count as CCP hours?
Absolutely. That one's easy. Rebecca, before you do go on, I will comment a little bit further on that. We do get a question a lot from members about how many hours they need to have as part of their CCP, and the college doesn't stipulate that. We very conscientiously and deliberately have created our CCP on an adult education model, which is where you see the fact that we have a self-assessment tool and then a performance development plan. We're unlike a lot of all of our regulatory colleagues, and certainly if you have spoken to any of your colleagues or friends or family members who might be a nurse or a doctor or OT or a physiotherapist or chiropodist, that their colleges will have what they call continuing education units or something similar to that effect that they need to complete each year. The college very specifically decided not to do that because of the breadth and scope of practice that are where our members work, that if we were to put out a specific course that said you need to take this in, let's say, child welfare, well, that might not be applicable to many of our members. And so we're not going to dictate what you need to take, in the same vein that we don't dictate how many hours you have to do, that's something that we leave to your professional judgment. That being said, when we have interviewed members and gotten their feedback, that most members report participating in around 25 hours a year of continuing professional development. And I mean, when you think about, you know, what you do at work, the readings that you do, I think those 25 hours add up pretty quickly. Your volunteer work, you know, if you're a field education instructor, there's lots of different ways. One more, Rebecca?
Okay, do we have to use the college forms? My work requires me to document as well. It is cumbersome and time consuming to do both.
Yeah, you do. You do have to use the college forms, actually. And yeah, I mean, I get it. I also have to do a performance evaluation at work. And there is you know, there is that kind of repetition there. The reason why we want it to be different is because your performance development goals at work could be very different than they are for the college, because you might at work have to have some very specific organizational knowledge, ongoing training, development, which may or may not link to what your professional development plans are for your own career. Perhaps there's another practice area or setting where you want to gain more knowledge so that you've got the competence to then practice in that setting. Perhaps, you know, you want to gain experience or know-how about something that has nothing to do about your work. So certainly this is why we do have the two different forms. We really have strived in the last couple years to simplify our forms a great deal, to make them very manageable and to make them easy to complete. And certainly the feedback that we have heard from members is that on average it takes about 30 minutes to complete the CCP. So I think that that is something that we have certainly worked towards to make it, as I said, you know, accessible and meaningful to members. So I just want to pause as well. Sue, I didn't know if you had anything that you wanted to pop in with here.
You know, just in hearing some of the questions, I think it is important to identify how significant the self-assessment tool is, and identifying the learning activities, which can be so flexible and so broad, as Christina mentioned, that you know, within the year you're addressing various concerns, challenges, issues, whether it be, you know, from a personal nature, from a intervention perspective. There's all kinds of things that can be then placed into the tool. And with peer feedback, that's an additional sort of encouraging view of what you're doing, how you're doing it, and how you can put those beside the standards of practice and the code of ethics in terms of what people are providing to you and the information that they're sharing about you and your work. So you can look at evaluating how you are functioning in terms of those parameters of the scope of practice and the standards of practice, so that you can really grow a very fulsome list of learning activities, whether it be resources, volunteering, personal, you know, mindfulness. So it's such a broad opportunity. So I think it really is important to recognize that this tool can add that, sort of enrich your experience throughout the year. It's like a live document. So I just wanted to comment on that as well.
That's great, Sue. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So we will have obviously a lot more opportunity for feedback. but I do want to move us into the documents and show some of our examples, and that might also help paint a better picture. So of course, we've got 3 CCP documents. However, if you go onto our college website, they are kind of all contained in one. So there is, of course, the instruction guide and the self-assessment tool and the professional development plan. And on the website, they are available in both Word format and PDF format. And the Word format has been done to really assist members if they want to be lengthy and if they want to really fill up that CCP page and really explain where they're at and think it through, that the Word document really does allow for that. And then there's the PDF as well, which is a format sometimes that other people prefer as well. So both of those options are available there for you on the college website. Looking at the self-assessment tool, I know that this is a little stretched out. We can see that it's a table and that you can list your strengths down this left-hand column here. And it may or may not remind you of some of the education learning plans that you did when you perhaps were completing your schooling, or perhaps now that you complete as a field education supervisor as well with your students. And so just because it can be a little difficult to read that form, we talk about the strengths and that you really want to ask yourself, what are you doing well? Peer feedback that we've already talked about, but thinking about, what would others say about my practice? Even if you're not able to get that feedback, that you could at least reflect to yourself, if I was to ask somebody else, what would they say about my practice? Your learning needs and interests. So where could you benefit from having further learning or professional development? Or what is your interest? What do you want to learn more about? Sometimes we hear from members that want to shift their field of practice or the client group that they serve. And so one of the ways in which they can gain the competence to be able to shift that practice or serve that client group is to plot that out and plan that out using their CCP about how they're going to find the knowledge that they need in order to become competent to provide that client group or to serve that client group, pardon me. We also want to look about what relevant standards apply to your learning needs and interests. And when we talk about the standards, we mean the standards of practice. And we're also thinking about our practice skills and our knowledge and what you need to be able to practice. So this is the other piece too, that if you're not currently practicing, because perhaps you're inactive or on leave, really thinking about what you need to have in order to prepare yourself to come back to practice. Now, a common question that we have from members, and I hope that I can clarify this for you, you do not need to have a goal linked to every principle in the standards of practice. There's 8 principles there. Maybe it's only going to link to 1. And that's okay. There's no requisite that you have to have so many principles checked off when you're doing your CCP. And as a cheater spoiler hint, that if you're not sure what principle your professional development is going to link up with, Principle 2, competence and integrity. That is the principle where we talk about doing our professional development in order to maintain our competence in an ongoing way so that we can competently provide service to our clients. So if you're stuck, Principle 2. Learning goals as well, of course, after we've gone through this self-assessment and really determined what it is, where we want to gain knowledge and expertise, then we're going to create some learning goals. And this is what's the result of going through this assessment. Now, here we have the professional development plan, which is the second step. And you'll see that our first column here on the left is the learning goal. So you transfer your learning goal from the column here on the right to the column here, which is on our left, right? So learning goal transfers over into your professional development plan because now we're going to plan as to how we're going to meet that learning goal. And so the learning goal gets transferred, as I said, from the self-assessment tool. And we really think about what learning activities and experiences we're going to embark on in order to complete or engage in meeting that learning goal. And to answer the question that we had earlier about where to put articles and where to put journal readings and things like this, it would be in this goal. or pardon me, in this column. So the second column that we see on the form right now, beside learning goals, where it's, our learning activities and experiences, that's where you're going to put the ongoing training that you do, the courses you're taking, your volunteer work, all of those different activities and experiences are going to be captured in that column. And then you're also going to think to yourself as well, so now that we've completed this learning activity, how do we know that we've completed it? Are you going to receive a certificate? Is it just going to be the fact that you've printed off articles and you're hanging on to them, you've got them saved in your portfolio? Did you sign up for a self-care course? What is your evidence that you've completed the learning activity and what that's going to look like? And if it's reading a journal article, maybe it's saying I read the journal article, or I familiarized myself with it, or I've printed it off and kept it for further reference. So again, the idea here is to be flexible, and the idea here is to be meaningful for your own practice. And of course, what this is all about at the end of the day in this last column of the PDP is the application to practice. So you've done all of this work, you've done your self-assessment, you've created your learning goal, you've identified the learning activities. How does this apply to your practice? And oftentimes that can be very straightforward. And this is the work that I do, this is the client group that I serve. Or, as I said previously, that sometimes it's, well, I wanted to gain more knowledge about this topic that I, am not as familiar with. Or I've been seeing clients, they've been expressing a lot of trauma, and I'm not as trauma informed as I want to be, so I've done some more research here. Or I want to go into a different area of practice, and I want to gain some knowledge and skills about how to shift. Or I want to prepare myself for when I return to practice because I'm on leave right now. So again, very individualized about how it's going to apply to your practice. And activities that we talked about. So oftentimes when people are thinking about CCP activities, they're talking about conferences, they're talking about courses, lectures, and workshops. Those are all really great things, and absolutely they apply. Spoiler alert, using this webinar today could absolutely be included on your CCP. Doing any of the college readings that we put out, also very applicable. But sometimes for people it's conducting research or that they've published an article. Independent study is also something as well. We've spoken to members before that, these kind of more commonly thought of activities, such as going to conferences or courses, might be prohibitive to them. Perhaps it's because of cost, because of location, a variety of different things. Family obligation, you're not able to go out and do these kind of ongoing learning and courses. So there's also the ability for us to, read from books, journal articles, as I said, reviewing college documents, checking out other settings and practices, shadowing somebody perhaps to even get more knowledge and information about another setting, or perhaps a community resource center that you may wish to refer clients to. Of course, if you do committee work, you're on a board of directors, a council, any professional networking, teaching, and of course, field education is one that we really want to highlight to members as well. That if you've taken on a student, there's a lot of learning that is part of that process. Not only just the administrative part of it, but through the connection that you have with your student as well. So these are all very common activities that we see on the CCP. And as I talked about previously, just to go back here for a second, these would all be listed in the second column here of your professional development plan. I'd mentioned beforehand as well that there are times when members will sometimes use some of their lived experiences for the CCP. And I talk with members every year about this, that let's just say life happens and they have gone through a period of change or difficulty in their life. Sometimes it's health issues, sometimes it's bereavement issues. And when members aren't able to practice in more formal kinds of learning because life events have occurred, which they do, sometimes they look at using their lived experiences as their learning activities. And so, for instance, when I've spoken to members beforehand who said that, they haven't participated in their formal professional development because they received a diagnosis, we talk about the fact that You had to learn about that diagnosis. You had to learn about the treatment and interventions and supports available for individuals who have that diagnosis. You also learned that very interesting role reversal of all of a sudden being the client in a situation as well. And that is a very reflective position to be in. And it's all of this information is transferable, typically speaking, to your professional practice. And so this is another area in which members have been able to complete their CCP using their lived experiences in a way that's, of course, meaningful and related to their ongoing professional development. We talk about, though, with the use of lived experiences, that of course we still recommend formal learning activities where you can. And we do, of course, want you to be mindful of personal and professional boundaries, and that we have to think about the appropriateness of your experience in your continuing competence. But certainly, again, speaking to members who have gone through health issues or have needed to be caregivers for individuals, or have gone through bereavement, that typically speaking, all of these different events are very transferable to the professional work that they do. So something that you can ask yourself if you're thinking about utilizing your lived experience is, does using this lived experience support your readiness to practice or ability to continue to practice? Does it relate to the work that you do? Is it transferable knowledge that you can use in your professional world? So I'm just going to pause again. I'm going to go into some examples right now of using a lived experience, and then also using an independent study, which again isn't these type of a formal learning activity. But Rebecca, just wanted to touch base to see if there's any questions that maybe we could address now before moving on to the examples.
Sure, we have a few that I could read out. So we have a question from Jennifer. Does clinical supervision count as learning activities and experience, or is it simply assumed for social workers, psychotherapists?
It's a good question. I mean, certainly if you're the person who's providing supervision, that may be something that if you're doing further work or learning to develop your competence in providing supervision, that would certainly be something that would be included. And I think if you're the person who's receiving the clinical supervision, that yes, I mean, certainly if you are in private practice or providing any type of psychotherapy, that type of counseling, that it is something that is more expected. But to say that, I mean, what if in your supervision practice, your supervisor says, I think that you could really benefit from learning more about X, Y, and Z, or exploring, this other modality. I mean, certainly, what results from that information would be very applicable to your CCP.
Okay, and we have a question here from Katrin. I saw the statement about registering late in the year. I thought you had 1 year from your registration date to complete your CCP.
Good question. No, you have to, the CCP is mandatory for all members, even if you register late in the year. That's absolutely correct. So if you were to register today, you'd still be required to complete your CCP by the end of the year, the renewal year, so December 31st. Of course, what that CCP is going to look like is probably going to look a little different than, say, what mine would look like. And that maybe it's either going to be shorter, and certainly we talk to members as well that if you are a new member, well, you had to learn how to, apply and register and become a member of the college. You're having to learn about the CCP now. Certainly you've probably done some college readings, which could all apply to your CCP. And of course, if you're just, say, for example, a new grad who's just become a college member, well, you can absolutely use that experience of your schooling to contribute towards your CCP. So it is still required for people who register late in the year. But again, if you think about it in such a way that, well, I'm a new grad, I can use my schooling, right? Or the experience it took for me to register. Or I've read several, college articles or newsletters or practice notes. All of that is very applicable, and something that you could, easily fit into a CCP by the end of the calendar year. Any further questions?
Sure, we can do one more.
Okay.
I just became a registered social worker this year. I have been keeping an Excel spreadsheet of my continuing education. I did not do a competency tool or SAT for the first year. Do I need to go back and do one?
It's probably something to think about. Again, we tell members that they need to retain their CCP documents for 7 years. And that is because I said, the college is permitted to request proof of CCP participation and completion. So it may be something that you want to do. Something that you'd wish to consider. Certainly, if you have a record of everything that you did, you could probably fill it in pretty quickly. But that's an issue that I will leave to your professional judgment to determine. Sue, is there anything else that you wanted to discuss before we move on to the examples?
No, you covered a lot. Just the one thing around the question around supervision and whether that could be used in terms of applying it to the CCP. And it's just a matter of sort of piggybacking on what you were saying, Christina. When you are hearing back from a supervisor in terms of, your learning, how do you then reflect back to the standards of practice, to the code of ethics? So even though you're getting supervision and you are basing your work and your improvement in your work setting, but you can also then transfer that to where does that fit in terms of competence and integrity or confidentiality? Do I need to learn about legislation? And again, that's something that you can easily translate into the continuing competency program. So I just wanted to just throw that out there as well.
That's great. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. Okay, so here's a scenario of somebody using their lived experience to complete the CCP. So just for accessibility reasons, I will also read it out. A member's father-in-law is admitted to hospital as a result of a cancer diagnosis. The member is asked to draw upon their experience as a hospital social worker to assist in navigating the healthcare system. This is a role reversal for the member who's used to being the professional and not the patient. This is a new learning experience for the member. And this is actually a scenario that was provided by a member of the college and how they used it to complete their CCP. And so, of course, here we have a blown up version of the self-assessment tool. And, we think about, okay, so what would be some of the strengths that the member would have that they would bring to this scenario? And, what are some of the learning needs and interests that they may have? So here we can fill it in and say, okay, so the member has obviously a knowledge of the healthcare system. They've got their compassion, they're quite patient. The family has agreed under the peer feedback section that because of their ability to communicate clearly and their ability to be calm, and one would assume because of their knowledge as well, that the families agreed that they will be the spokesperson. So where this member identified that they needed to have some additional learning is learning about the pertinent legislation and of course the specific hospital policy, because even though you may be a social worker in a hospital setting, you may not be familiar with the policy of which, where your family member is situated. And of course just learning about any resources in the community as well. As I mentioned, a relevant standard that would be applicable to this would be Principle 2, which is competence and integrity. I've included the interpretation here. You don't need to include it actually in your CCP. It was just for educational purposes. But Principle 2, Interpretation 2.1.3 talks about being familiar with the policies, resources, and supports that are available to support your client group. That's a paraphrase, it's not exact, but that is the feeling. And so what the member decided here was that they were going to increase their knowledge of being a caregiver to a family member who had a new cancer diagnosis. That was the learning goal. Then, of course, we're going to take that learning goal from the last column of the self-assessment tool, and we're going to pop it right in here into the first column of the professional development plan. And so we know that the member wants to increase their knowledge of being a caregiver to a family member with a new cancer diagnosis. And I'm wondering perhaps if people can respond on the chat about what are some potential learning activities or experiences that this member could bring in order to increase their knowledge of being a caregiver to a family member in this scenario. So we'll just pause there for a second. And Rebecca and Taylor, if there's any responses coming in, please go ahead and let us know what they are.
There's nothing yet coming in.
Okay, no worries. Do you know what? You're a clever bunch. You know that I already have some prepared. So some of the activities that we've talked about, which might be applicable in the situation, is that perhaps the member is going to review some applicable legislation, like the Healthcare Consent Act. Perhaps they're going to look at the hospital policies and patient resources. Oh, that's a little bit of a data reference there with the CCAC. Maybe they want to keep a reflective journal about how this process is impacting them and their family members, because that may be one of the ways in which they process the experience. They might want to wish to engage in some mindfulness practice or some yoga to, again, help deal with this stressful situation of which they have agreed and been nominated to take. And maybe they want to consider attending a family support group. So that could be another way that they're going to learn about what it is to be somebody who's in receipt of services as opposed to a provider of services. So these are a variety of different activities that the member could choose from, and this isn't an exhaustive list. And perhaps if you were in this situation or you have been in this situation, that this is not your list, and that's okay. Maybe your list looks a little bit different than this. So just showing what it would look like if we were to put in the learning activities. So this member said that they were going to review applicable legislation, patient resources, they were going to keep a reflective journal, they wanted to engage in mindfulness practice, and attend a family support group. So these are a bunch of the activities that the person decided that they wanted to participate in order to facilitate them achieving their learning goal of increasing their knowledge of being a caregiver. And how they were going to show evidence of completion of these tasks. Well, they were going to complete these readings. They were going to complete these readings of this different legislation, and that they were also going to be able to affirm that they had enrolled in a cancer support group. And how is this applicable to their practice? Well, they're using their empathy effectively, incorporating knowledge and resources, modeling self-care. And of course, if you, again, were in the situation or have been in this situation, you may have found different reasons or different ways in which it was applicable to your care. That perhaps having that experience of being a service recipient was something that was very profound and meaningful to you. And so that was something that also created a greater understanding and sympathy for individuals who are coming to you for services. And so there's, again, this is just an example. This is not written in stone by any stretch of the imagination. Perhaps you would have filled it in differently. Perhaps you have filled it in differently, and that's okay. But it's just an example of how using a lived experience could be applicable to you increasing and continuing with your own professional development and competence in a way that is relatable to your professional practice. Sue, was there anything more that you wanted to say about this example?
No, actually, Christina, I think you've covered what I would have commented about, so it's all good.
Thank you so much. So another scenario that I wanted to explore with you as well is this idea of kind of an independent study scenario, because this is a scenario where we're not looking at those different formal types of professional development that, like I said, for me anyhow, it's typically what springs to mind: doing courses, workshops, seminars, something where you might get a certificate at the end of it. So this is another example of how a member was able to craft the CCP in a way that was individualized, in a way that was meaningful and accessible to them and their needs. So this member lives in Northern Ontario, and it can be very challenging for them to access in-person professional development because it's expensive to travel to conferences, excuse me, or courses, and also it can prohibit them from being from home for long periods of time. And so we know that there's more professional development courses that are available online. However, due to the fact that they live in the North, they can sometimes have some poor internet connection. Which can make it difficult for them to live stream events or watch videos. So the member decides to conduct an independent study of available resources that support isolated individuals living in the North. So again, looking at what the professional development plan looks like, really the member wants, the self-assessment tool looks like, really wanting to think about, what are my strengths that I bring to this independent study query that I have. What would be some feedback people say? Why do I have a learning need or interest in this domain? What relevant standard applies? And what learning goal can I create from this self-assessment? So we know that the individual has a strong connection to living in the North and that they already have experience about systems and resource navigation. They have received feedback that they are dedicated to working and serving in the community where they live. Their learning need and their interest is that they want to be aware of supports that possibly they haven't referred somebody to, that they haven't accessed themselves, so to create that awareness of other resources. And they really want to, have a learning need of how to link to isolated individuals and how to link those individuals to needed supports. You'll see a repetition here as well, that a relevant standard which would apply to this learning need would be competence and integrity. Again, it's interpretation 2.1.3. Again, you don't need to include that in your CCP. It's just there for education purposes only. And so from this self-assessment, the member determined that they're going to reach out to community agencies and stakeholders, and they're going to develop a list of services that support isolated residents of Northern Ontario. So here again, we've transferred this learning goal. I'm pointing to my screen, not that you can see where I'm pointing, but the learning goal on the right-hand side of your screen right now from the self-assessment tool into the same column, which is now on the left-hand side of your professional development plan. And so I'm just curious, again, we'll see if we've got anybody who wants to reach out and let us know what they think that may be some potential learning activities that this member could engage in order to meet this learning goal of developing a list of resources and services that are available to support isolated residents of Northern Ontario. So I'm just going to pause here for a sec. Pausing also gives me an opportunity to have a sip of water. Any thoughts coming in, Rebecca?
Yes, we do. I just wanted to flag that unfortunately some participants aren't able to use the chat function. So the comments are coming in through questions, which is okay. So I'll read them out for you.
Perfect, thank you.
So there's internet searches, contact agencies, first do an inventory of members' own networks and identify gaps, ask colleagues, search services on the internet, contact intake workers to discuss the resources they offer, call or research community supports, networking, site visits, join networks of agencies and community groups.
That's awesome. Those are great learning activities. That's fantastic, everyone. I think it's better than the list that I came up with. But again, similar, right? Call other community service providers, contact libraries perhaps, or community centers, consult with other professionals or leaders in the community, maybe even call a government representative or keep a journal of your thoughts and reflections during this process, and maybe even identifying through that process further gaps in service. So thank you for your participation. Those are some really great ideas. So what this could look like in the completed professional development plan is that this member decided that they were going to call community service providers to learn what services they have to offer and what services they also refer to. So if I'm a community service provider, maybe I provide some services, but I also probably refer clients to other services as well. I'm going to consult with other professionals or leaders in the community. Evidence is that I'm going to have a list. I'm going to have a list of these things at the end of it. And I'm also going to circulate this list to communities and to service providers, pardon me. And how this is an application to practice. Of course, this is going to increase your ability to support clients and further develop a network of community service providers. So again, just really wanted to show that example of something that is maybe outside the box from what people might consider for their typical CCP, but how this type of experience can absolutely be part of your CCP professional development. I've got a mail deliverer at my door right now, so sorry if you heard that knock in the background. So those were my points that I wanted to show for examples of how members might, I've got some more going on at my door right now. I apologize for the background noise. And sorry, I got a little distracted there for a second. This is COVID life, right? We're living at home and there's these things that just happen. So wanted to open it up now to your questions, to your conversations, and thinking about, you know, your own CCPs, what it looks like. So do people have questions about what to include in their 2020 CCP? Is anybody unclear about the standards of practice, you know, that relate? We can certainly talk about that. If anybody wanted to share one of their goals, we can talk about that, or any learning activities, or just, you know, really opening it up here for your questions. We've made sure to have a lot of time right now to talk about questions at the end. So hopefully Sue and I can provide you with some insights. Questions, chats, whichever.
Okay, so we have a question here. Can I include learning more about working in a COVID-19 world?
Sure, absolutely. To that point, you'll notice that the college has put out a lot of different resources to members who are working. And, you know, we know that some of our members are essential services and some of our members may not be deemed essential services by their place of work, and that determination comes from your place of work. And so certainly a lot of members have been figuring out how to practice online. Sue and I have had a lot of calls about virtual practice. You know, if you're doing research about what online platform to use, I mean, that's certainly something that would be applicable to your CCP, figuring out how to provide those online services. If you are providing direct service, you know, learning about, you know, the PPE you have to wear, and what are the different requirements, all of that is very relatable and applicable to your professional practice for sure.
Yeah, just I'll add to that briefly. Like Christina mentioned, we're getting a lot of calls, a lot of requests about, you know, how to manage, how to navigate, different suggestions, just in terms of how practice looks these days. So again, absolutely, you're learning so much. Everybody's navigating this territory. It's so unfamiliar. And how does that then translate into a competent practice? Do you have to, you know, refer on? Do you have to look at ways to make sure that your clients' interests are paramount? Like, all of those things will always reflect back to the standards. So we are in such an unfamiliar world right now, and there's so much uncertainty, and it certainly helps to look at how you've been able to navigate, and really that should reflect then in your learning, I would think, you know, in the way you fill out your form there.
Absolutely. And that's probably a universal one that most of us can put on our forums as well. So it's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, the next one is there a number of goals that the college recommend we have each year?
No, that's a very personal decision. And it could be that some individuals have multitude of goals, and you know, that's how you're oriented as a person, or perhaps they're just a lot of small goals that are easily attainable and easily achieved. You know, maybe you're somebody who's either a social service work member of the college or a BSW member of the college, and you're going back to school and taking your bachelor's or your master's degree. That might be one goal, right? And it might extend over a couple of years. So that's going to be something that you're going to need to apply your professional judgment to, and to really kind of determine what fits for you, but there isn't a requisite number of goals.
And the next one is, can we ask someone at the college for feedback on our self-assessment tool or professional development plan?
There are times when Sue and I have assisted members because of accessibility reasons to complete their CCP, but typically speaking, we don't provide that direct feedback. But by all means, you know, if you have a question, please send us an email. Our emails are on the website, and our emails are also going to be at the end of this presentation as well. That if you're stuck with something or you're stuck, you know, send it to us. You know, I think that what members need to remember when they're doing their CCP is that this is your plan. It relates to you and your needs. And so it's even kind of tough for Sue and I to say what's going to work for you and what's not, because, you know, we don't know you and what your learning needs are. So try to really think about when you're doing your CCP, you know, as you're filling it out, you can ask yourself, you know, how does this relate to my professional practice? How does this relate to my readiness to practice or my ability to continue my competence to practice? And, you know, why we do this is to be able to provide the best service we can to our clients. So that can be another reflective strategy when you're considering your CCP. Does what you're including in your CCP going to affect your ability to provide the best services that you can to your clients? If by all means, at the end of the day, you still have some questions, please send us an email and we will do our best to get back to you as soon as we can. So is there anything else that you wanted to add to that?
No, like you said, there are some unique circumstances where we've had to support members with accessibility and just help them walk through the information, but absolutely it's unique. It evolves based on your lived experience, your work experience. So, you know, certainly we can't speak to how best to execute your goals, but if you want to throw something our way, and we'd be happy to take a look, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll do one more.
Yeah, great.
I have completed many online courses, but to get a certificate of completion requires more money. How would I have evidence of the completion?
That's a good question. I wonder, one of the ways that, I mean, you could show that you at least completed signing up for it, right? That you would be able, I'm sure through your email, and probably have an email receipt that you had signed up for the course. And so that may be one way of doing it. Perhaps through taking this course that you were able to, you know, download some documents or some resources. You know, that, you know, and maybe you just want to put on your CCP that if I needed, you know, to get the certificate, I might have to pay some more money, but really kind of accurately indicating what course you took, when you took it, what the date was, who the instructor was, just really keeping record of that information. So do you have any other strategies there?
No, I think you've covered everything.
Yeah.
Actually. Yeah.
Yeah, but I do know that sometimes I certainly do save the receipts from signing up for an online course as well, if there was money attached to it. But likely speaking, even if it was a free course, you're probably going to get an email confirming your registration with it. Like this one, for instance. I'm sure that you know, I know because I signed up for it myself, that you get a you know, just even an email to confirm that you're registered for it. So that could be a form. And Rebecca, keep the questions coming, because this is what we're here to discuss right now, unless there aren't any more.
We have many more.
Okay.
Here's another one. As an independent private practitioner, I don't find step 2 of the CCP helpful. Can I just write not applicable in that section and complete step 3 independently?
So step 2, do you mean the self-assessment tool? You don't find that applicable? That's interesting. Because yeah, step 2, because step 1 is to review the standards of practice. Step 2 is to complete the self-assessment tool. I think the self-assessment tool is kind of an important part of the professional practice, the continuing competence plan. I mean, certainly you're going to fill it out in a way that is most meaningful and applicable to you. But I mean, I would imagine, you know, again, being someone who had a small private practice for a while as well, you know, working with my clients, that they were, you know, wonderful resources about areas where I wanted to gain more knowledge and more experience. And certainly, you know, as part of my private practices, I'm sure it's the same for you, that I wanted to continually engage in taking ongoing learning and courses that were going to enhance and support my ability to provide that service. And I mean, I think that is part of the self-assessment, right? And so certainly I think that even if it's something very quick that you put in the self-assessment plan, that it would be something that you could complete. I mean, again, you know, looking at, you know, what your learning needs are, that you'd want to increase your knowledge about how to provide your clients. Yeah, I gotta go back for a second here to look at the different, peer feedback. I mean, maybe that part isn't applicable for you, but maybe you have talked about, what clients have said to you about your service, or maybe what your supervisor has said. Your learning needs or interests, or that you want to take another course on providing this modality of psychotherapy. A relevant standard would be Principle 2. Your learning goal is that you're going to sign up for this course, right? So I think that there is a way to do it in a way that's quite quick. But certainly, I mean, Sue and I are not able to give you the dispensation to just kind of skip steps, that they're all part of the process. And they are part of the process for a reason, is that we want our members to be reflective in the work that they do.
Okay, and the next one is, where do we find the required readings?
The required readings, so there is, you'll have received e-bulletins that have the required readings in them. I'm wondering, I'm nervous to scan to them right now because I don't want to mix up where we're at in the presentation. But certainly we have mailed out in e-bulletins copies of the required readings, and so with links to them, and you are able to find them if you go to the college website. I will do it really quickly. So here we are on the home screen. Now that Sue and I have figured out, we're going to scroll over professional practice. We're going to go down to continuing competence. You're going to click on that. And if you scroll down, you're going to see the CCP documents here, and you're going to click on that link. And here you are able to find the required thing. Yeah. And just because we had a question about the practice notes earlier as well, you're going to see on the right-hand side of the page here that we've got a bunch of different drop-down menus. And here I'm scrolling over practice notes. And if I click on that, all of our practice notes come up. And underneath competence, this is the most recent one that I was referring to here. Okay, so hopefully that's helpful.
A lot of great resources there.
A lot of great resources there. So yeah, Sue and I do, I mean, that's sometimes part of our practice consult, is just helping people to navigate the website. And once you get into the website, it does become more intuitive to navigate. We do work hard on that. And it can be challenging sometimes because we do have so many resources. So hopefully that was helpful about where to find the required readings. It's under the CCP documents section on the website, and where to find practice notes as well.
I'd also add to, just being fairly new with the college, that even going in the publications tab, there are additional resources that you may not even find in the professional practice one. So there are employee communiques. There's really great articles there. Of course, we have our e-bulletins, and that they're really interesting reads and very helpful. So you can see them all there. That some overlap, but some don't. So use our e-bulletins and the communique. Where's the employee communique? Oh, there's the employee communique. I thought we recently had something fairly interesting around technology. So and even our frequently asked questions, we just did the cross jurisdiction piece, and also in our e-bulletins we talked about communication technology, which isn't in our professional practice tab at the moment. So, take a look at all of those, our annual report, our strategic plan, those are really, or maybe it's just me being super, super excited and interested about it just because, but there's really great information in there that talks about diversity and inclusion, and, how we can support individuals who are marginalized. And so really, those resources are fantastic to just to navigate through.
And anytime you review them, it can count towards your CCP.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so you just keep track of them, right? And I mean, if you wanted to print them off, you could. If you wanted to save them, you could, or just keep record of what you read and when. Do you have some more questions, Rebecca?
If your learning goals change throughout the year, how do you best document that? Do you need to complete another professional development plan for last year or add an addendum?
However it makes the most sense for you. We don't dictate that. It's totally okay for your learning plans to change. I mean, maybe, I still like to do mine in pen and paper because that's how I started doing them, and that's how I continue to do them. So I'd probably do it old school and put a line through them and initial them and then write something new. But that's up to you. it likely is a good idea to keep record of what was your previous learning goal. I mean, if you're doing it online, you could even do a track changes and delete it, because then you can still see what was there. Because, you know, we do talk about that when we are documenting, that we do want to keep record of any edits and amendments that we make, and that's specifically for the clinical record, but it might be applicable to the CCP. And so you may just want to keep note. And so certainly by creating an addendum, you know, whichever way makes the most sense for you, you know, that's how you can do that edit. Because yes, we know learning goals change. As I mentioned at the top, this year specifically, a lot of learning goals have changed. And maybe you just want to say that that one's no longer applicable, or you have new ones, or you're putting that one on hold. However, that makes the most sense for you.
And the next question is, does the CCP cover the coming year or the past year?
Well, that's a good question. The CCP that we're talking about right now is the 2020 CCP. So that's the year that we're in right now. And as I mentioned, you know, typically speaking, if you will, best practice is to begin your CCP at the start of the year. So January, February, because you really want, the goal of it is to track and plan for what professional development activities you're going to be creating throughout the year. Sometimes members don't do that for a variety of different reasons. And so then what you're doing, you know, before you renew your membership at the end of the year is cataloging what professional development you did do for the year. So it is in the current year. We're talking about the 2020 CCP right now. You're welcome to start on your 2021 right now if you so chose to. But you know, it would be my recommendation that if you were going to you know, complete the 2020 CCP for this year, then next year maybe start January, February, just really thinking about what your professional development goals are going to be for that year, and then really plotting out the plan as to how you're going to work to achieve those goals.
And just to add to that, when you're doing that, when you're renewing your membership and you're reviewing your 2020 CCP, then you may, as Christina recommended, you might start January, February, but you also may be looking at that time when you're renewing if there's anything that's going to carry over to the following year. So just to keep those kind of bookmarked so that you're able to transfer them to the 2021 CCP.
Absolutely. Thank you. Next question, Rebecca.
How can I show my work as a member on a voluntary board?
Yeah, so I think that if, again, kind of going back to what the SAT is saying. So I mean, talking about, you know, my strengths, that I am invested in my committee or part of my community. You know, I want to give my skills back. Peers have said that I'd be great on a volunteer board or volunteer work. Learning needs and interests, you know, learning how to become a volunteer, learning what that process is, doing the volunteer orientation, learning what it means to be a volunteer at this community, the relevant standards. There could be a few that are appropriate for that one. And then, you know, what your learning goal is, you know, to further enhance my experiences as a volunteer, to continue with being a volunteer, to become one. You know, there's a lot of different ways that you could make that applicable to you. And then, of course, you know, the learning activities that you've had from being a volunteer, or how to be a volunteer. And so, yeah, there's a lot of different ways, and how that applies to your practice, again, going to be unique to your own specific circumstances. But one would imagine that where you're volunteering likely has some type of, it might have a social service bent to the organization that you're applying to. Perhaps you're learning more about governance, which is applicable to your organization, or to some other work that you do. So again, it's going to be very unique about how you're going to fill that in, depending on where you're volunteering, why you're volunteering, and what the community group is, or who is served through volunteering. So let's say, for example, you know, you're volunteering at a food bank, that you could also talk about, you know, the applicability to practice there, you know, learning different resources that are available to community members, you know, finding a different way to support my clients. You know, there's a variety of different ways that it could be applicable to your practice. Sue, do you have more to add to that?
No, I don't. I wonder though if the question was around that she was a member, or he was a member of the board, a volunteer member of a board, which, again, would carry over in terms of what your suggestions were anyway, Christina. Like, you're learning what that looks like, what it means. You're learning about governance. Some of the evidence of completion, I think, was the main question. How do you identify or show evidence that you are a volunteer member of a board? That has probably to do with, some readings or resources that you've either helped develop or you have reviewed. So there can be like some work as a result of being on the board, work that was developed, or there is some kind of an output or outcome that you could use in that column as evidence.
For my own example, when I was on a volunteer board as well, I had to learn how to run for nomination to be on that volunteer board. I had to learn about what the scopes of my responsibility were. I had to do the board member training. And the reason why I joined that board was to further support the community, and that was applicable to my practice as well. So again, individual ways of looking at it. And I hope that helps kind of stimulate some thinking for you about how you might use that really valuable experience in your CCP.
Okay, and the next one is, if I'm in the process of getting registered with the college and unsure of whether it will be finalized this calendar year, can I use transferable professional development from the jurisdiction where I'm currently licensed and also my learning process around becoming licensed in Ontario so as not to leave my CCP to the last minute?
Yes, that's a nice, easy one. Absolutely. Any further questions? We're coming close to time, but we've got room for a couple more, I think.
I have another one here. Is there any free training that's recognized by the Ontario College of Social Workers and Social Service Workers?
Of course. I mean, this training right now, right? I mean, we don't identify training or to allow us to recognize it. So, I mean, certainly, as we've discussed, the college doesn't identify what training opportunities people have to participate in or what ongoing education you have to take. And, in our lived experience example, and also the example of somebody not using kind of traditional forms, I mean, those were both free forms of experience and activity that people participated in. So yeah, we certainly recognize a variety of different learning activities. And I mean, sure, there's great pay for training activities that are out there, but there's a lot of really valuable free training that's out there. For example, as we were just showing you reading through the college website, there's a lot of resources there, and they're completely available to you free of cost. And by all means, that type of training, that type of learning can all be used towards the CCP. This is not meant to be a prohibitive program for people. It's meant to be accessible, and it's meant to be meaningful to your practice and your educational and professional development needs.
Okay, and the next one is, if you registered late in the year, for example, in November, would your learning goals be for the past year or just for the time when you registered to the end of the year?
I mean, really, it could be either way. I mean, certainly, if you've taken training, let's say in May this year, and you registered in November, I mean, that training that you took in May is still going to be applicable to your professional development this year, and it's still going to be applicable to the work that you do to support your clients. So absolutely use the training from prior in the year. But of course, as we've talked about as well, that if you're becoming a member of the college, that's also some learning you've had to do, going through the application process, attending this webinar today. So these are all things that can be used. And I think it's important for members to kind of expand their thinking that way, because we do so much as social workers and social service workers on a regular basis to learn, to develop, to enhance our skill set in different ways. And so it's important to really, I think, sometimes reflect upon those and acknowledge them, and they can absolutely be captured on the CCP.
And the next one is, when will the 2021 documents be available online?
Oh, good question. So the documents that we have online right now are date fillable. So technically they're available online right now. Technically the 2025 ones are available online right now. So you'll note that with the documents that are on the website, they don't have a date in them. It just says date, and then you can fill the date in. So they're available for use at any time. And just looking at the time, I think we've got time for one more.
Okay, so there's one here. There are many webinars I've taken where I didn't get a certificate, but I keep detailed notes of what I learned in the webinar. Is this acceptable evidence of completion?
Yes, absolutely. Yep, I think that's a great one. And I think that's a nice one to end on as well. And I'm really hopeful, you know, as we're summarizing up here as well, that, you know, through our conversation today, we've really talked about how flexible the CCP is, and that it's not meant to be restrictive or prohibitive to people. And that you're right, sometimes we don't get certificates, but that's not the only way to show evidence of completion, right? So I think having those notes, you know, again, making a date, you know, who is the instructor, what course you took, having those notes, absolutely you can use them. As of course, you know, just our final thought today before I turn it back to Jane, and I put our contact details up on the screen as well. That of course your registration with the college and the annual completion of the CCP, it's what we do to demonstrate to the public that we're qualified and current in our knowledge and practice, and that it demonstrates and underlines our commitment to learn and develop as a professional. So just thank you all so much for your attention today and your participation. I feel really good about our meeting today and our experience today. And here is our contact details. As you can tell, Sue and I are not in the office, so using the phone numbers to contact us probably isn't the most effective way to connect. So certainly there are our emails, and you're welcome to contact us with any further questions we weren't able to answer today, or any other professional practice questions you might have as well. So I know, Jane, you had wanted to be able to come on and say a couple things as well.
I'm back.
Wonderful.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for the two of you, Christina and Sue, for taking this time today to provide the education for us and answer any of our questions. I feel way more confident in filling out these forms now, and realizing I may not have been as detailed in the past that I could have been. Being in private practice, I was sort of narrow thinking of these, and now I can truly go, my strengths are in other areas as well. So thank you very much. Now my documents are going to be bigger. More time, 30 minutes for sure. That's what you said. So thank you. And one of the last questions was about free education. And I just want to highlight that the OASW has an education network of free webinars for registered social workers and social service workers. So connect to that, look at the OASW website for more details if you don't get the notifications of those webinars. So
that's a great suggestion. Yeah, absolutely.
If you're looking for free, it's free for us as a connection. So
that's right.
Thanks everybody for attending today. We hopefully that you can provide some feedback to this webinar so that we can plan for more events, and we'll take everything into consideration. Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you so much for inviting us.
Hey,
Yes,
take good care, everyone. Be safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye.